How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and I am joined, as always, by my demonically possessed television, Christian Slater. How you doing this week, buddy?
We need to put some mirrors up in here so I can check out my flex game.
You want to install a mirror wall? We can make this thing look like a dance studio if you want to, buddy. I'm on board. All right, so I was a little worried this week that I wouldn't have much to offer for our opening segment, where I talk about what I've been playing. But I was able to finally get around and check a couple of things out. So I decided to finally dig into that My Dream Setup game that I talked about last week and maybe even the week before. It's essentially like a little toy. It's pretty cool. Like I like it quite a bit. I would say it's very similar to like the build mode in The Sims, or even a game like Unpacking, though it has no story, no narrative whatsoever. It's essentially not even really a game. It's more like an interactive toy. But I've really been enjoying it.
So you can waste hours in this thing, but you can't make this shithole look any better?
Well, why don't you stop punching fucking holes in the wall, claiming that you're making the house more aerodynamic, and that'll make the house a little bit nicer. But it is limited in what you can do. I'm trying to think. I have about 4 hours of playtime put into it. I think I've made 4 rooms. I think there's space for 6 or 8 rooms. And obviously you could just delete a room and start fresh. But it's like oddly limiting. So there's this blueprint mode where you can, and I think I talked about this before, but you can design how big or small you want the room. It allows you to do different shapes. Like everything's on a square, like a flat edge. You can't do anything circular or anything like that. But you can't make any like indents or anything like that. Everything has to be a square or a rectangle. So it's honestly just like, why don't you just give us small, medium, large, which I think I brought up last week. But it really, at the time, I didn't realize how limiting that was going to be. It really does kind of take away from the creativity when you are limited literally to just building in this one kind of box shape area. And I'm sure if this game does well, they'll add more stuff. So, I'll keep my eye on to see if they add more things. I think it definitely needs just more of everything, just more of every kind of computer. There's only 2 televisions, more different types of furniture and stuff like that, because even at the biggest area, it is kind of difficult to build. Like if you wanted to make this look like a studio apartment, like it is kind of difficult to fit everything in, especially when you can't add walls. Like everything has to be an open space. You can't put up a dividing wall whatsoever. So what I ended up doing in one of the rooms, just to break it up, is I just made walls out of bookshelves. So I guess, there's workarounds you can do, but it's a little odd, but I really enjoyed my time with it. Like I said, about 4 hours of playtime. And I think that's kind of like my max. I can't really see myself opening it back up for any reason until I see if they've done an update. But I think I spent like $5 on it, and $5 for 4 hours, I'm fine with that for what it is. It's not trying to be anything that it isn't. It really is just an interactive little toy, and it's cool. It's people like sim things for various reasons. I like just building around with stuff. I remember when I was a kid, I was always weirdly obsessed with those like build your home pieces of software you would find at like Home Depot and Lowe's and Walmart. And I remember I took a class in junior high school where we had to do that. And I actually got like really into it and designed this like whole house and this whole outdoor patio area and this whole thing. And the teacher was like, holy shit, like you went all in. And I was like, I don't know, there's something in my brain. I really like this stuff. I think I mentioned it before when I play The Sims, and I've played a lot of The Sims in my life. I really don't play The Sims. I just play the build mode, and I just like building houses. So this kind of scratched that itch. But it left me with kind of a deficit because I had finished, last week I mentioned I finished Hogwarts Legacy. I was kind of without something to play, and it's not unusual for me to go a whole week without playing a video game. I do that often, it's not strange, but for whatever reason, I just was like, I really want to play something, and I don't want to wait until next week, which is now this coming week, when WWE comes out, which is the next game I'm going to pick up, I just want to kind of play something. So it was Friday morning. I was just checking YouTube and saw that Digital Foundry had put up a new video, and I always like checking their stuff out. And it was about Gotham Knights, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Gotham Knights came out several months ago. I think it was a last fall release. And it was, a very heavily criticized game for multitudes of reasons. Gameplay, story, graphics, you pick it. It was getting a lot of negativity online. And they had said that they had basically done a big update to the game that fixed a lot of the performance issues. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And, it was like, well, obviously, it doesn't fix the story. It doesn't really fix the way the game plays outside of the fact that it plays smoother now because it's not dropping frames all the time. And it really kind of got me thinking. I was like, oh, maybe that's the kind of game I could play right now. Like I don't necessarily have to buy it with the intentions of finishing it if it can be had at a good price. And, I could trade it back in when I'm done and get almost all of my purchase price back if I get it for a good price and treat it kind of like a rental. And so that's what I ended up doing. It ended up, I don't know if it was coincidence or on purpose with this update being out, but it was like 60% off at GameStop on Friday. So I ordered it and got the same day delivery. And so I played, I think about 3 or 4 hours into Gotham Knights now. And it's not bad so far, but it is interesting. I will say that it's very generic, and oddly very overwhelming. So I would say most games kind of over tutorialize you. This game, in a way, kind of under tutorializes you, and it even in the tutorials, like there are legitimate just like menus of tutorials where you go into like a blank combat area to practice moves, and it's just like do what's the name of the thing I had to do, like a perfect strike or a perfect counter or something like that. And it's just like do it when the opponent's about to attack you. Well, when the opponent's about to attack you, there's a circle that opens up, and then it turns into like a star like this. And it's like, okay, well, do I do the attack when it's the circle or do I do the attack when it's the star? I tried both ways and I wasn't doing it right. And I was just hammering on this for like 15 minutes until eventually I did 5 out of 5 that I needed to do. I have no idea how I did it. So that's a little strange. And then also so there's 4 different playable characters because you can do this like online co-op. I'm choosing to just do a private game. I'm not going to play it online with anybody. And your characters level up the same essentially. So you pick who you want to play each day. The game has during daytime, you are having meetings and discussing, there's cutscenes and you're discussing the ongoing plot and all this stuff. And that's where you can access the tutorials, read your email, level up. There's a workbench so you can craft stuff. All that stuff happens during the day, and it all takes place in this one location, a belfry at the top of a tower. And then when you want to go and actually play the game, you exit the belfry after selecting what character you want to play, and then you go out and it says you're on patrol for the night. And then that's where you're actually advancing the story and, doing combat and all that stuff. So when you're out doing all that, if I'm playing as Red Hood, I'm, maybe over the course of that night, I'm going from level 4 to 5. Well, that means that when the next time I play as Nightwing, he's also going to have leveled up from 4 to 5. I don't have to, if I really wanted to, I guess I could just play as the same character all the time. I don't know if there's anything that eventually will stop you from doing that. But what happens, though, is that's a great system to have everybody level up equally. But there's these knighthood challenges where those level up individually, and they are the same for every character. So now you have to do each task 4 times, and it's repetitious to a fault. It is pointless. This game would be saved in a lot of ways by just taking that system out and just having everybody level up the same, regardless of what challenge you're doing, regardless of what activity you're doing. Everybody just levels up the same. That would make things a lot easier. It's very overwhelming in the sense that not that you open the map and it's not like it's filled with all these different activities for you to do. There are activities for you to do, but they don't necessarily tell you what they are. So there are activities that have like a big colorful icon, and if you hover over that, it'll say like, oh, this is this. Maybe it's a main story mission, or maybe it's this. They have these things called premeditated crimes, where the night before, if you discover clues, it'll tell you that, oh, the next night they're going to be attacking this bank or, dock, shipping port, whatever. And then you go and you beat them up and all that. But then there's these like other little icons on the screen. They don't tell you what they are. You can set a waypoint to go to them. So far, every time I've done it, it's just been a couple of enemies that you beat up and then you get some XP. And then when you press down on the D-pad, it does your like detective vision thing. Every game's got to have that, and you'll see all these other icons pop up and you're like, oh, okay, interesting. So then it's like, oh, maybe now that I've done this detective vision, those icons will now populate on my map and I can see what they are and I can go do them. That doesn't happen. So what you end up having to do is you have to press down on the D-pad to get the detective vision, and it'll say like, oh, you're 200 meters away from this. So then you just have to head in that direction, and every so often hit the button. Am I still going in the right direction? Still going in the right direction? It's like, I get that maybe that's an interesting thing to do to get you to explore the city, but it's also like a really clunky way to do things, and it would just be easier like, let me scan it, I find it, put it on my map, and I'll set my waypoint. And then I'm done, and I can just go and progress. There's a lot of needless travel in the game, a lot of needless getting from point A to point B, because there's not a lot to do along the way. You kind of have to compare this to Spider-Man, because to me, for two reasons. One, it's another superhero game, so it's a decent comparison that way. It's a third-person melee-focused game in an open city, so it's very similar in that way, but also you kind of have to compare it because, anytime a AAA game comes out, it's going to get compared to kind of the gold standard of the genre. And right now, for third-person action open world superhero games, it's Spider-Man. So in Spider-Man, if you're going from point A to point B across that city, there's stuff constantly happening. Now, you can skip it if you want to. You don't have to engage with every little thing. Sometimes you just want to progress the story, and I'll go back and do these things otherwise. But so far in my time playing this game, in my time traveling from one side of the city to the other, nothing has come up. So now I'm just spending time driving on this motorcycle from one side of the city to the other just to get from point A to point B. And really, what I've kind of figured out, and I get that I'm only a few hours into this. Like I said, I think I'm about 4 hours in. This game didn't need to be open world. There's really no reason for this to be open world. I think this would have been better served as just a tight narrative adventure, like an Uncharted. It really seems odd for it to be open world because it doesn't have a lot of those open world tropes. And some open world tropes are bad and you don't want your game to be full of them. But some of those tropes are in there because they're proven to be successful. They're proven as a way for player retention to keep playing this game, progressing with the story, feeling like they got their money's worth. Now, I didn't spend very much money on this game. Do I see myself finishing it? I don't know, maybe, because, WWE does come out next week, but WWE it's a very particular kind of game. It's not telling me a story, really, even though there is a story in it. It's a game for me to play on mute, catch up on my podcasts, YouTube channel stuff, whatever I'm doing on the side, for entertainment-wise. And that serves like a very particular need, and that's great. But, sometimes you want to play a game with a story and experience it and blah, 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 all that stuff. So maybe I will finish this game because there's really nothing else coming out for a little while that will satisfy that need. It remains to be seen. But regardless, I didn't spend very much money on it. I don't feel like I'm getting, if this is the extent of the game after playing it for a few hours, and I'm okay with it. It's not that big of a deal. But I could definitely see if you paid $70 at launch for this game being highly, highly disappointed with it. I definitely understand and sympathize with that. But I think this is a really good example of a game that's like, when it gets down to $30, gets down to $20, pick it up, because it's not terrible. It's just not great. And it's not going to meet your $70 expectations, but it might very well meet your like $20 expectations. So I haven't unenjoyed it, but it's not blowing me away by any stretch. Christian, any thoughts on watching me play Gotham Knights?
I'm Batman.
Thank you for that. But that's going to wrap up what I've been playing, and we'll be back in just a moment with the news. All right, we are back with the news, and so for a little bit of behind the scenes, how this show works, it's not like this is some secret formula or anything, but I filmed this show on the weekend, and so throughout the week, Monday through Friday, I check all the video game websites, compile news, figure out what I want to talk about, and I have a little doc running list of what we're going to talk about, all that stuff. And it was like Wednesday this week, and I was like, man, it's looking pretty thin this week. There's really not a lot going on. A couple of things here and there that popped up on Monday and Tuesday. But then, man, the second half of the week blew it wide open, and I think I've got more to talk about now than I have in any previous episode. So buckle up, I guess. The big news of the week, at least for me, was that we finally have a release date for Starfield.
I'd like to send you into a Starfield.
Yeah, right back at you. Starfield is one of my most anticipated games, and I'm honestly not sure why. I'm not a huge Bethesda fan. I played Skyrim and thought it was fine. I don't like the Fallout games whatsoever, but as I discussed last week when we were talking about the Outer Worlds really kind of opened me up to playing a Bethesda-style first-person shooter RPG kind of thing. Cyberpunk, there are flaws with Cyberpunk, but I did enjoy Cyberpunk and, similar style of game. So it was announced that Starfield is not going to come out the first half of the year like we were told. It is going to come out September 6th, and they are going to have a full-fledged Starfield event on Sunday, June 11th. And it looks like we're going to get a deep dive into the game. I don't know how long it's going to be. They've done stuff like this in the past with the Fallout games, I believe. They might have done it with Elder Scrolls stuff as well. But I imagine it's going to be just like a hyper-focused, pre-recorded, here's some behind-the-scenes footage, some interviews with the devs, that kind of stuff. But I imagine it's probably going to answer a lot of questions that people have and, get some real actual footage of gameplay. And we actually got a little bit when they did the trailer, and it was like a, full just rendered cutscene kind of trailer. But then at the very end of the trailer on the YouTube video, they showed Todd Howard, physically standing there talking about the game, and behind him was a television with somebody playing the game, and then they kind of cut to some gameplay footage as well. So you got to see both first person and third person mode, so you can see what's going to work best for you. But it's nice to see that it looks like they are now finally fully committed to getting this thing out this year, getting this thing out in September. I know that people were really hoping for it to come out the first half of the year because it had been delayed before, and now this is technically another delay. I'm honestly fine with it coming out later in the year because the first half of this year, especially June, if they were targeting that June kind of time frame, June is rough for video games, man. You've got Street Fighter, Diablo, and Final Fantasy like right within like 2 weeks of each other, and Diablo and Street Fighter I think are only like 3 days apart. And now obviously those three games aren't going to appeal to everybody, but I'm sure there's probably a decent amount of people that are going to pick up 2 out of the 3, if not 3 out of the 3. So I'm okay with the delay, especially because we don't know much about the back half of the year. We have games that we've been told are coming out the second half of the year, but we don't know when. So I'm cool that I'm looking forward to it. I think that them getting this date on the books at the very least for all the other games that are planning to come out around that time, it's probably going to clear that probably 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks. The week the game comes out, maybe even the 2 weeks after it comes out, just so people, a lot of people are going to be getting this on Game Pass, so they're not going to be spending, more than their Game Pass subscription costs. So, they'll have some extra money to buy something else. But if people are really invested in this game, and this game is as big as they are expecting it to be, it's not that people aren't going to want to buy another game because they can't afford it because they just bought this. They're not going to want to buy another game because they're still actively playing this all day, every day, that kind of thing. And then lining up with that June 11th Starfield Direct thing that they're doing is Microsoft's essentially their E3 showcase. It's the Xbox Game Showcase, which will be on June 11th. They posted on Twitter that it's going to be focusing on games coming out within the next 18 months. So I assume that's going to be from summer this year through holiday next year. I'm sure they're going to show off, what a lot of their internal studios have been working on, because Xbox has been really slow on getting games out over the past couple of years. It's kind of the running joke right now is that the Xbox just doesn't really have any exclusives. And I think that this is probably the year where they're going to actually bring some games. They've got Starfield coming out, Redfall is coming out before, but they'll still talk about like, hey, it's another exclusive that's coming out this year. They have Forza coming out later this year. So there's 3 big ones, right there. And I'm sure they've got more to talk about. Fable is still out there somewhere. Perfect Dark is still out there somewhere. Who knows if by June the Activision stuff is settled, they could start talking about stuff on that end that is exclusive. Do we see, Diablo comes out right before this? I think it's just a few days before this presentation. Do we see if everything is settled there? It's like, hey, later this year, Diablo is coming to Game Pass. Like, who knows? Because unlike Diablo 4, unlike Diablo 3, Diablo 4 is day and date consoles and PC. So it would not be out of the ordinary for them to be like, hey, after 6 months or a year, of being available for purchase, you'll be able to pick it up on Game Pass or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Moving on, a little bit of Hogwarts Legacy news. They have delayed their previous gen versions. They were supposed to come out next month in April. They are now coming out in May. And I'm really surprised I guess not surprised. I don't know why I said that. I am very curious to see what this game is going to look like on the PS4 and Xbox One, because there are issues with the current gen versions where not everything is seamless. I mentioned when I kind of did my little recap of finishing the game last week that there are times where you are running from the castle and going from building to building or from inside to outside, where you approach a door and legitimately a circular loading icon comes up because it's loading what's on the other side of that door. And that takes 10 seconds-ish, maybe a little bit less on PS5. What's that going to be on the PS4 and the or on the Xbox One? Because I know on the Series S, it actually goes to a loading screen. So I assume it's going to be a lot of that. I get the feeling that you're probably going to be experiencing a lot of loading screens on these versions. And then the Switch version, which is still coming out a few months later, it's coming out in July. That is very curious because I don't know, all these games that are being announced as coming to Switch or possibility of coming to Switch, like Call of Duty, Microsoft saying that they're confident that there will be parity between the PS5 and the Xbox One and Switch versions of Call of Duty. How? Like, legitimately how? The Switch is so far behind the curve technologically, and it's not supposed to be an equal to those systems. It's an alternative to those systems. It's something entirely different. So this feeling that you have to put all of these games on the Switch is just, I don't know. I guess if the Switch is all you have, then do you even want these lesser quality versions of these games? Because I feel like if you really wanted to play these big graphical powerhouse type games, you would find another way to get them, whether it's PC, getting them on a more powerful console, something. I don't know. I guess if I only had a Switch, I just think I wouldn't be interested in playing a lesser version of something. I think that I would just either be okay with not playing that game, or I would want to play the game so bad that I found another way to play it. Yeah. We'll see. But we had kind of a big game announced this week, at least for a certain group of people. City Skylines 2 is coming out to PC and consoles this year. And the quote is, the game hopes to welcome both new and veteran players. So if you're not familiar with City Skylines, the original, it's essentially SimCity. It's a different kind of Sim City game. You're building towns, cities, and they've done a million expansions for this thing, and they've added, oh my god, there's a crazy amount of detail to this thing, getting into like water flow and sewage lines and train routes and airports and all this stuff. And the way somebody put it in a comment on one of the articles I was reading about it was, this seems like a really good way for them to strip out a lot of the DLC from the first game so they could just sell it back to us. And honestly, you kind of have to believe that's exactly what's going to happen. I would not be surprised at that. I never really got into City Skylines. At the time, for whatever reason, I had the game and I got it in some type of bundle, and it never ran right on my PC. And I don't know why. It exceeded all the minimum requirements, but it was always very buggy and would crash all the time. And I never knew why. And then the computer I use now, I built, God, it's been 3 years at this point. Jeez. No, 2 years at this point. I built this computer in 2021. And, this would, I no problem playing it, but I don't know, I've never gotten around to playing it. I think at this point, because it's like, when I want to play the base game, like I own it, but do I really want to play it? And then do I really want to sink a bunch of money into this DLC? And then seeing that the sequel is coming out, it's like, okay, maybe this is just an opportunity to start fresh. As I grew up playing the SimCity games, a lot of people my age grew up playing the SimCity games. The first one I played was on an old Mac at the elementary school I went to. And then I remember playing like the Super Nintendo version, and then I remember getting SimCity 2000 and playing quite a bit of SimCity 2000. And then when EA did that reboot of it several years ago that went horribly, horribly wrong, I was all in on that. I got it day one and couldn't play that game for days, because if you remember, that game shipped and the online servers did not work and you could not play that game. And I remember waiting 2-3 days before I could actually get it after spending $50-$60, whatever it was at the time, to buy it. And I remember they ended up having to give you a free game as like a make good. So they like allowed you to like cash in a credit on Origin to get like one of 10 games or something like that. I think I got Dead Space 3, which I never played because I don't think I was interested in any of the other games. But I'm up for trying this when it comes out. It's been a long time since I've played a game like that. Every once in a while, it's been a couple years at this point, but every once in a while I would go back to that SimCity that came out, because there were things that I really liked about it. I really enjoyed the way that the road tool worked. It was very snappy, very easy to put curves, bends, the whole thing. Like, there are things about that game that were good, but they made a lot of just really dumb decisions and really limited that game. Which is, that's kind of what EA does. And then going from new game announcements to games that we hadn't heard about getting canceled over at TT Games, which is Traveler's Tales. They are the people that make the Lego games, like Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, which came out last year, which I really, really enjoyed. I like those Lego games. I think they are pretty cool. I think they have lost a lot of their charm now that they have gone to fully voicing the characters, at least as they've done with the Star Wars games. I think having the sight gags and all that of the originals was a little bit more creative, but and I also think that they kind of got maybe oversaturated. We had the Lego Batman games, we had the Lego Harry Potter, Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings, multiple Star Wars ones, all that stuff. They were pretty much willing to make a Lego game of like any license that they could get their hands on.
I was once in negotiations with them to make Lego Heathers.
I mean, that sounds insane, but it also sounds entirely plausible. I would not be surprised. But the games it looks like they got the axe were Project Cosmo, which would have been Lego Guardians of the Galaxy. It actually says it was in development for 1.5 years, so probably 6 months to a year away from being done. I actually would have really, I've mentioned this a few times. I'm not a huge Marvel person, but I like the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like the one Marvel movie I will go and see. For the first time, I'm going to go see one in the theaters when the third one comes out. I just watched part 2 for the first time a few weeks ago. So I would have bought that. Next after that was Project Rainbow Road, which was actually not Lego game, which was going to feature multiple Warner Brothers properties, including DC, Rick and Morty, Looney Tunes, and Stranger Things. It says it was started as a Funko project, and then they try to salvage it, coming up with different ideas for its own character designs to try and get the WB properties around. So it sounds like it would have been DC, Rick and Morty, Looney Tunes, and Stranger Things in Funko Pop form as a game. And then they had to kind of figure something out. And then the last thing was a mobile port of an existing game, which is Lego Worlds. And then it looked like they had also gotten some Mandalorian DLC in development for the Skywalker saga. Looks like that is not officially canceled. And then it looks like they were also maybe developing another Lego Batman game that has been canceled. So Traveler's Tales, TT Games, whatever you want to call them, I guess officially it's TT Games at this point. You know, they got a lot of hot water last year when the reports of all of the crunch that was going on as part of the Skywalker Saga Lego game definitely did not bode well from them for a PR perspective. You know, it's a shame, you know, that's the way games have to get made. You know, nobody should be treated like that while they're trying to do a job. You know, I think these deadlines and budgets and all this stuff, it's just too much. You know, you don't need, it's a vicious cycle, right? Like, in a perfect world, you wouldn't need to pump these things out so often because there are so many video games out there in the world. You know, there's thousands of games that come out every week on Steam. But there's only a select few that get marketing budgets and even production budgets to really make a dent in the world. So it's disheartening to hear this stuff, and especially when you hear a game like this potential Lego Guardians of the Galaxy, which, you know, if it was 18 months, I don't know, it probably wouldn't have gotten out by the time the movie got out. But imagine they could have timed it when the movie came out. They could have done really well for them. And that's a shame. So next up on our list, and this one was interesting because it involves video game retail, which I used to work in video game retail. So the article on Kotaku is called "GameStop Employees Freak Out as All Resident Evil 4 Collector's Edition Store Pre-Orders Get Canceled." So it looked like if you had gone into the store and pre-ordered I believe it was $200, if not more, $250 Collector's Edition of Resident Evil 4, you got your game canceled. And then an update came out later in the week saying that people that bought it online were now getting it canceled. And it looks like as a make good, they are going to give you a $10 off coupon on a regular copy of the Resident Evil 4 remake. So GameStop, I find to be a very bizarre company for a multitude of reasons. Now, I said I worked in video game retail. I never worked at GameStop. I worked at an independent, essentially mom and pop video game store. We were very odd in the fact because most independent video game stores do not sell new games. They just sell used games because your profit margin on a used game is 1,000,000 times more than your profit margin on a new game. But we were very unique in the fact that we stocked every new release. You could come in and buy a brand new console, a brand new game, but you could also get used games. We did retro and all that stuff. We sold basically any game that would come into the store. We would take, the only stuff we ever really turned down was like vintage computer stuff because the market, at least where we are in the world, was just not there. It wasn't viable. Every once in a while we would buy it as a lot and try and sell it as a lot, but kind of few and far between. I still keep in touch with the owner of the store. I still buy some of my games there, and trade stuff in there and go and say hi, when I can. And so I don't know, actually the last time I was there, he was talking about buying some vintage computer stuff. So maybe he's decided that, or maybe he's found that there's some money in the area to be made on that. But the way that this stuff works is it's very strange. And you don't think about how hard it is sometimes to get a video game. There are a lot of games that get physical releases that you will never see in a store. You either have to go to a small independent store that is going to use the distributor that game is being distributed through to get it. and their chances of getting it aren't 100%. You can put in an order for 5 copies and get 1. You can put in an order for 5 copies and get 5. You can put in an order for 5 copies and get 0. You never know what's going to happen. There are a lot of games where you could walk into a GameStop and they just don't have it. And it's not that they're sold out. They don't even sell it. They don't even offer it. You can walk into a Best Buy, same story. They don't even sell it. They don't even offer it. You got to get it through Amazon. You got to get it directly through the publisher. Stuff like that. Stuff like the limited run games. And I know at one point in time, I don't know if they still are, they actually were selling limited run games in Best Buy. So people were going to Best Buys to get them. But I look at where I live, and I live just a few minutes outside of a city of about 100,000 people. So not a massive city, but not a tiny city either. So we have all the traditional big stores you can think of. We have Walmarts, we have Targets, we have one Best Buy. We used to have 3. We are down to 1 now. We have probably close to 10 GameStops within a somewhat 30-minute driving distance, So we have a lot of options, and then we have the video game store that I used to work at, and I think there's probably 1 or 2 others that are still around. Some have closed over the years. And back when I worked there, which is, God, we're getting close to, I quit 10 years ago next year. So it's been a while since I've been working in retail, in video game retail at that. But I mean, back then, we always tried to get whatever we could. People would come in and ask for certain games, and we always would try. We would at least ask the distributor, can we get this? And sometimes we could. Sometimes we got those weird visual novel games that only one person wanted to buy, so we would only order 1 copy. Because we knew that if we bought multiple copies, even if offered, it wasn't necessarily going to be the easiest thing to sell. And at that time, it doesn't seem like it, being 9-10 years ago, it doesn't seem like things were that different. But back then, not as many people were digging online for these niche titles. They are now, but at that time they really weren't. At that time, the retro thing was huge, and I know it still is. People are, nowadays it's like the GameCube era is really big right now. At the time, it was still very much Super Nintendo. And with the Switch getting all these like weird digital only titles in a physical version has really kind of created this big boom that didn't really exist back then, because obviously the Switch wasn't a thing. But we started to see it with the Vita, because I worked there when the Vita launched, and there were a bunch of Vita exclusives that we would get phone calls about, or we would, people would post on the Facebook page like, hey, do you think you can get this? And sometimes we could, and sometimes we couldn't. So that was like the taste. That was like, the drug dealer giving you a little bit to try and hook you. And in the years since then, it's crazy how people that are completionists that want to have a complete Switch collection or complete PS4 collection, because there are some really, really bizarre PS4 games that got very, very low print runs that people will pay huge money for. I think there's even a few maybe on the Wii U as well, that are outside of just your rare and hard to find games from like the Genesis era or even the GameCube era, which is really hot right now. So it does not surprise me that GameStop, well, I guess I should emphasize it this way. It does not surprise me that this would happen at GameStop. To the general public that has never worked in video game retail and might not be privy to how these things work, it might be surprising that the largest video game exclusive retailer in the country is canceling pre-orders for a very big anticipated game. Like that may be surprising to some people. It doesn't surprise me, because GameStop, the way they handle their business makes zero sense whatsoever. And so that, that part's not surprising, but it is weird now to walk into a store that only sells video games and they may not have a new release. Like, that is odd. Like, that feels weird. And there is no real fix for that. You just have to go online, and then you have to fight with scalpers that are going to put them up on eBay. You have to fight with people that are, maybe have the flexibility to sit around all day just pressing refresh trying to get copies. I deal with that stuff on the toy side of things, on the record side of things. Although with toys, it's a necessary evil because there is no other way to get them. With vinyl, at least, I might not get the cool color, but I can just get plain black, and I'm okay with that. I don't need everything to be super fancy. I just want to get the record so I can listen to it. I don't want to get the record and just put it on my shelf so I can try and sell it later on, because anybody that keeps their record sealed and just buys special editions and limited editions is lying to you if they say that it's like, oh yeah, no, I buy them because I listen to them. They don't listen to them. They sit sealed. That's why I never understood the whole buying graded things. You're not buying something graded for any other reason than to sit on it and hope it becomes worth a bunch of money so that you can sell it later on. If you're saying anything otherwise, you're lying to yourself. So yeah, it sucks. And I think a 10% off coupon is not a very good make good, at all. I don't know. I think that's just whatever, man. It's GameStop. What are you going to do? Moving on, in a bit of hilarious news, I don't want to dig too much into this. I've been actively avoiding this story for the most part since I started doing this show because I just don't care, and it's always in the news. And that's the whole ongoing saga between Sony trying to put the kibosh on Microsoft getting Activision Blizzard exclusivity. Sony has now stated that they are worried that Microsoft would purposely release a PlayStation version of Call of Duty where bugs and errors emerge only after the game's final level or after later updates. Microsoft responded not long after saying, no, there will be parity between all systems for Call of Duty. Sony is really coming across as like a 6-year-old that's like an hour deep into negotiations with their mother about the pros and cons of whether or not they should be able to go on an all whipped cream diet. Like it is laughable that a multi-billion-dollar company is like retorting to like playground level insults to try and stop this deal from happening. I really love the idea that Sony thinks that Microsoft is like going to sabotage them. I would not be surprised if like, well, what if they put like a DDoS attack in Call of Duty that just stole everybody's identity when you put the disc in your PlayStation 5? Or what if they ship a version of the game that when you open it, it's just a picture of a middle finger? Like, it's like this is not going to happen. Like, yes, and I'm sure in Microsoft's ideal world, they would have the exclusivity for this game and only put it out on Xbox and PC and have it be on Game Pass and have it be a draw for Game Pass. I think they understand they cannot do that. So, if they cannot do that, why would they not try to make as much money as possible? Because they're going to get money out of licensing the game to Sony. Sony gets money out of Microsoft having the show on there. There's still some money getting tossed back to them. It's going to be the same thing. So I don't know. Maybe they're upset about that. Maybe they're upset that Major League Baseball was like, hey, dum-dums, you got to put this game on other systems. You can't just have it exclusive. So maybe that's it. Maybe you gotta get pissed off at Manfeld over at Major League Baseball and be like, man, baseball is the reason why they're taking Call of Duty away from us. So it's just bizarre, just really, really bizarre. Like I said, I don't really want to cover that story too much because it's so pointless and so stupid. But that comment was so ludicrous and so like, who comes up with that? I had to bring it up. All right. So we talked previously about the last Sony State of Play where the big set piece at the end of the presentation was, I think 15 to 20 minutes of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which is the next Rocksteady game. Well, a lot of people didn't like what they saw. They were very critical online. It's a live service game, very similar to like a Destiny, loot-based. It's always online. They did not like the way that the characters looked when they played. They all looked very samey. The game looked very generic, similar to a Gotham Knights, as we discussed earlier. Well, apparently Rocksteady took that to heart, and they have reportedly delayed the game. They have not put a date on it. They just say that it'll be delayed until later this year. But there is another report that came out that said it actually might not now come out until next year. So possibly, I am sure they're probably aware that this game is probably not going to sell very well. So if they put it at the end of the year, when you're up against Starfield, up against Spider-Man, it looks like Call of Duty was supposed to take a year off, but it looks like we actually might get another Call of Duty this year, which is really pissing off the Call of Duty community. So if you have these big heavy hitters coming out at the end of the year and you know that this game isn't going to do well, maybe it is for the best to push it until like February of next year and kind of sneak it in there and try and get your sales that way. But I don't think that delaying this game is going to fix the problems that people had with the game. They didn't have problems with like graphical issues or bugs or things like that. They had issues with the way the whole game was designed, like the whole core crux of the game was designed. You're not going to fix that in a few months. You're not going to fix that even in a year if you push it back to this time next year. You're not going to fix that. You're not going to re-record dialogue, rewrite the script. You're not going to tear the game down to its bones and build it back up. It's just not going to happen. It's the same thing with Cyberpunk. The biggest problems with Cyberpunk were not the bugs, were not the glitches. You can get past that. I did. I finished that game before the second patch came out. It was a fucking mess. The problem with that game was the dialogue, the script, the characters, the mission design, like the core elements, the building blocks of a game, the food pyramid, if you will, of the game. That was the problem. You're not going to fix that like this. I think that this delay, honestly, is just so that people kind of forget about how crappy it looked when the first time they saw it. That's just me. But Christian, I know you kind of have a stake in this game. You are Christian, you are part of the DC universe. Is this game kind of a sore spot for you, buddy? Because you actually used to be Deadshot, and you're not Deadshot in this game. So what's going on with that?
Well, when you strangle the studio head, threatening to burn it all to the ground unless you start getting Batman money, you don't have a lot of options.
Yeah, buddy, I love you, but I don't think you're getting Batman money. Although I would say, Christian, personally, because I do love you as an actor, I think in the 90s you would have made an excellent Batman. I think you would have been a very good Batman. All right. Last on our list for news this week is that we got a gameplay trailer for Robocop Rogue City. So this is being made by the same developer who did Terminator Resistance, which is a deeply flawed game, but has since developed a huge cult following. People really enjoyed that game. So they put this trailer out. Nacon, which is the publisher, they did like their direct thing. And I actually should have mentioned when we talked about City Skylines earlier, that was actually part of a Paradox Interactive big event. Capcom also did an event this week, but there wasn't much of note coming out of that, so I decided not to bring it up. But Nacon did their thing, and they showed this RoboCop thing. I love RoboCop as a property. RoboCop 1 is one of my all-time favorite movies. I really enjoy RoboCop 2. RoboCop 3 sucks. I did not like the remake. I have not liked much of the tangential RoboCop stuff. I never really got into the comic books. I saw the cartoon a little bit when I was a kid. I like just the first two movies. This game looks like shit. It looks terrible. It looks devoid of life. It looks so strange. Like, you get this license and then you turn it into a first-person shooter, which I guess I get it. RoboCop shoots people. I don't know. Take a look at the trailer. It does not look good. Now, they have pulled this out of their ass before with this Terminator game and turned it into a cult following type deal. Could they do this with this game? Maybe. But I didn't see anybody saying anything positive about this trailer this week. So, is what it is. But yeah, that's going to wrap up the show for this week. A few days ago, we got the new episode of Full Motion Sickness out, where we took a look at Soldier Boys on the PC, made by Darren Aronofsky. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next for the next one. I've got a couple ideas. I want to do Fahrenheit at some point. That is on my list. And also, let me see what else I got on my list. Double Switch. Double Switch might be the more interesting one to do. I've never really seen much of Fahrenheit. Like, I know what it is. It's a firefighting game on the 32X, if you're not familiar. I don't know how much FMV footage is actually in that in terms of narrative for me to talk about. Double Switch, I know there is. I mean, that's essentially like an interactive movie, sort of. It's like a trap mechanic thing, like Night Trap is. So that's definitely a possibility, but we'll figure something out. I enjoy doing that because like I said, I have a very big affinity for FMV games, and it's kind of my ode to Mystery Science Theater 3000, though a million times less funny. The only other thing I wanted to talk about this week is I am getting closer to having another kind of big video done. If you're a little bit new to the channel, I used to do these kind of deeper dive video topics. There's some ones on the, they're all on the channel, so you can check them out. I've covered arcade wrestling games. I've covered bizarre arcade cabinets, like from a design standpoint. I've covered rail shooters, light gun shooters in the arcade. I've discussed the year 1990 in video games. I've discussed CD based systems in the 90s, and I'm getting close to having the next one enter the editing, filming stage and all that stuff. The script is almost done, and it's going to be a challenge to get it done because I don't have a ton of free time these days, and those videos take a long time to make. But I want to, the reason why I'm saying this out loud is I want to kind of force myself to get back on that horse and get it done, and hopefully have that out in the somewhat near future. We'll see. But other than that, that's going to do it for me. It's going to do it for the show. Christian, do you have anything you would like to add before we leave?
Are you going to spend tonight putting toothpicks into marshmallows so you can act out your fantasy of having a support system?
I absolutely am. Take it easy, everybody. We'll see you next week.